This will be for the con exercise. Solve for an angle in right triangles. So right here, they're looking to solve for angle A in degrees and round your answer to the nearest tenth. Okay, and this question mark, it should be more or less here, but this question mark represents the measure of angle A. All right, so you want to remember for this exercise, SO, CA, TOA. Those will help you remember the three main trig formulas. All right, the S stands for sine. And the angles are going to be represented by a question mark. And I'm going to make more room here. So sine of the angle question mark is going to equal opposite over hypotenuse. The O is opposite, the H is hypotenuse. So I'll just abbreviate OPP over HYP. Okay, over here the C stands for cosine. The angle measurement is a question mark, and that equals adjacent over hypotenuse. So I'll abbreviate ADJ over HYP. And finally, the T stands for the tangent. The angle is a question mark, and the formula is opposite over adjacent. So I abbreviate OPP over ADJ. All right, so you're going to use one of these three formulas on all the problems. All right, so let's label our diagram. Okay, they want us to find the measure of angle A right here. So you look at the angle being referenced, you go across from that angle, and that side length is your opposite. I'll abbreviate OPP. You go across from your right angle to the side, and that side is your hypotenuse, HYP, and the remaining side is adjacent, ADJ. Okay, so we're only dealing with the two sides that are given, so we can ignore hypotenuse. We have opposite and adjacent. Which one uses opposite and adjacent? That is this one right here, the tan function. So we need this formula. All right. So we have tan of question mark equals opposite over adjacent. All right. And you want to leave some space on both sides when you fill in the numbers. You'll see why. But we don't know the question mark yet. We'll leave it as tan of question mark. And that equals opposite, which is 8, over adjacent, which is 2. Okay, you don't need to reduce this fraction. Now, we're trying to isolate the angle, the question mark. So, in order to get rid of the tan function, you want to do the inverse tan on both sides. So, what that looks like, you write tan and it looks like an exponent of -1, okay? But that's not an exponent, that is the inverse tan. So we're doing inverse tan of both sides of this equation. All right, so we're going to take the inverse tan of this whole thing, and we're going to do the inverse tan of 8 over 2 as well, and use parentheses. Inverse tan and tan, those drop out. We're left with the question mark. We want to use the calculator to do inverse tan of 8 over 2. All right, so I'm going to do inverse INV tan. See, it looks like tan to the -1, but that's inverse tan. It'll show up as arctan, but that's the same thing. And in parentheses, 8 over 2, or 8 divided by 2. And close the parentheses. Okay, arctan is the same as inverse tan. Now, these are supposed to be in degrees. So on your calculator, make sure the DEG is in boldface. Okay, hit equals, and they said round to 1 decimal place. All right, so you want to look at the second decimal. If it's 5 or more, you round it up. So 75.9 is going to be rounded up to 76.0. I'm sorry, they said nearest hundredth. That's 2 decimals. All right, so you want to look at the third decimal. If it's less than 5, you round it down. So this is just 75.96. So just enter that in the box. All right, once again, you want to label the sides. So look at the angle that's being referenced with the question mark. Okay, you go across from that angle to the side, and that's going to be your opposite. You go across from the right angle, and that side length is going to be your hypotenuse. And the remaining side is adjacent. So you want to go with the side lengths that you are given, so we can ignore adjacent. And which of the formulas uses opposite and hypotenuse? Well, just look for the O and the H, opposite and hypotenuse. Clearly, we are using the sine function. All right, so we said the S stands for sine. The angle is represented by a question mark, and that equals opposite over hypotenuse. Okay, so we don't know the question mark. We'll just leave it. And we're going to leave some space here. Opposite is 2. All right, leave some space. And hypotenuse is 3. All right, what you want to do to both sides, here we have sine. We want it to cancel. We're going to do inverse sine on both sides. It looks like sine with an exponent of -1, but that is not an exponent. That is inverse sine. Okay, we're doing inverse sine of this whole thing, and we're doing inverse sine on the other side as well. Inverse sine of that fraction. On the left, the inverse sine and the sine drop out, and we want to evaluate this on the calculator to solve for the question mark. All right, make sure you're set to degrees. You want to do inverse sine, okay, inverse sine. And it says arc sine, same thing. And 2/3 in the parentheses is 2 divided by 3, close parentheses. Okay, degrees is in boldface, hit equals. They said nearest hundredth, that's 2 decimal places. So you look at the third decimal. If it's less than 5, you round it down. It's 41.81. All right, in the box, you got 41.81. I believe all of these will say nearest hundredth. That's 2 decimal places. All right, as always, look for the question mark. That's your reference angle. You go across from the angle to the side. Label the sides first. That is your opposite. Across from the right angle to the side, that's your hypotenuse. And the remaining side is your adjacent. Okay, so look at the sides that are given. Ignore the side that is not given. We're dealing with adjacent and hypotenuse. Okay, which one uses adjacent and hypotenuse? We'll look for the A and the H. Adjacent and hypotenuse, that's going to be cosine. All right, so cosine, the angle is the question mark, so a cosine of the question mark is going to equal adjacent over hypotenuse. All right, now filling in the numbers, leave space on both sides. We have cosine of question mark. Adjacent is 4, and hypotenuse is 5. Okay, the way to get rid of cosine is to do the inverse cosine on both sides. So you do the inverse cosine on both sides. Okay, on the left, inverse cosine and cosine drop out. We're solving for question mark. We're going to do inverse cosine of 4/5 on the calculator. Okay, so we have inverse cosine, in parentheses, 4/5, which is 4 divided by 5, and then close parentheses, click equals. All right, 2 decimal places, you want to look at the third decimal. If it's 5 or more, you round it up. So 36.86 becomes 36.87. 36.87.